Okay, Jan, we've reached the stage with your assessment plan where we've done the feedback, or my observation of your feedback with your candidate, and I've looked at your evidence for A1. And we're now at the stage, as I say, where we need to do the professional discussion. Now, when we first talked about this and drew up your assessment plan, we did say that we would try and capture both the record, which could be written or spoken for A1.1, yes, combine that with the record of professional discussion for A1.2, yes, and the one for A1.3, and the one that's required for the knowledge.
Yes.
Okay. So that's what we've agreed to do. I did say that you could bring some pre-prepared notes. Have you done that?
Yes, I have, thanks,
Fine.
Graham. I've got them with me here.
Okay. And you've got your assessment plans for your
Yes,
candidate?
in front of me.
Okay then. So you're happy to continue?
Yes, Graham.
Fine. What I'll need to do is start the tape recorder and just do a brief introduction to say who we are, where we are and what we're doing, and then I'll just hand it over to you.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll start the tape. And just for the benefit of the tape, say this is a record of a professional discussion between Graham Walker, assessor, and Jan Nelson, who's a candidate for A1, and it's taking place at Jan's place of work, which is Kimberley House in Leicester. And this professional discussion follows my observation of her giving feedback to one of her candidates and my examination of evidence that she's produced for A1. Okay, Jan?
Yes.
Over to you now.
Well, what I decided to do, Graham, was to draw up my assessment plans with my candidate and also involve her front of house manager, Sally, so that she would be able to see me drawing up the assessment plans and agree where her involvement would be. So I went through the assessment plans with both the candidate and also with the front of house manager on her qualification, because she was actually working towards customer service, and we were looking at promoting continuous improvement. I chose the methods of assessment because I believe them to be fair and valid and also reliable methods. I chose observation, and the reason that I decided to use observation was that I thought it was the best way to trap naturally occurring evidence of her carrying out her job role. I wanted to see her in a cost-effective way so that I could obviously take up as little time as possible to see her carrying out the tasks that she needed to do to achieve the criteria for the actual award.
Fine.
She was happy that I was going to observe her, and we agreed a time and a place that the observation would take place in the plan. And she felt that it would be a fair way for me to judge her performance. I also then needed to ask her some questions to plug the gaps. So I asked her oral questions as well about some of the activities she'd carried out. And I needed to make sure that I understood a little bit more about what she was actually doing and the job role which she had relating to how she was using the evidence that she was putting forward to achieve her award. So I also looked at the product evidence that she produced, because she'd been looking at the evaluation side, forms that clients had produced, and she'd been developing systems around improvements. So the product evidence she showed me, I again asked further question and answers around to make sure that I understood how she'd actually used that. And this, I felt, was again an effective way of being able to understand how she'd actually carried out her job role and why she had created improvements which she needed to do to meet up with the standards for the actual award. The fourth way that I actually carried out my assessment methods was to ask Sally, who was her front of house manager, to be her witness. And because Sally is in the workplace observing on a day-to-day basis the activities that Susan performs, I felt it was going to be a relevant method for her to be able to look at the naturally occurring evidence. And it was going to be cost effective because also with her being there on site, she was going to be able to look over a period of time at what Susan was doing without it actually involving me going in on a day-to-day basis to observe every task. Now, Sally was also very busy, and Sally obviously occupationally understands the role that Susan does very well, but what she wasn't 100% happy with were the standards around the MVQ. She also felt that she didn't have a lot of time to be able to produce the evidence the witness testimony that she needed to do in a written format. So having had a conversation with her, we agreed, both Susan, Sally and myself, that what Sally would do would be observe Susan in the workplace. She would then make some notes on what she'd seen, and then I would telephone her, speak to her on the telephone, where she would talk through what she'd actually observed, and I would then record it, and on the visit when I came to carry out the observation, look at the product evidence and do the question and answers, Sally would then read through what I'd written from her telephone call and sign it if she felt it was appropriate and covered all the right areas.
Fine.
Now, I felt this was reliable because it had taken place over a period of time. It was sufficient because it was over a 6-week period that Sally was actually able to observe Susan in the workplace, which met up with the requirements that we needed to cover. And also it was authentic because I knew that Sally was in the right position to be able to look at all the points that needed to be covered and make sure that the customers that we were talking about had actually been existing customers.
Fine. Well, you were going so well there, I didn't want to interrupt you, but there's a couple of queries I've got.
Yes.
Just take you back to a couple of things. One's around the Q&A and the other's
Yes,
on the witness.
of
Is that
course.
okay?
That's fine.
Yeah. In terms of the question and answers, you referred to plugging gaps. Can you just say a little bit more about what you mean?
Yes,
by that?
I wasn't sure. With some of the knowledge and understanding, obviously when she'd been carrying out the performance evidence, we'd been able to actually see activities that had taken place, both myself on my observation and also through the witness testimony. A lot of the tasks she did, we could see. What we didn't know was obviously whether she had understood why she had to carry out these activities and how it fitted in against the standards of the award that she was actually having to meet. So it was part of her day-to-day activity, but what I wanted to be sure of is what she did before and what she did afterwards, because sometimes this hadn't been captured, we hadn't been able to observe it, and so I needed to know whether she'd actually covered the whole process. So she was able to tell me how she'd set up a system.
Fine. So you were plugging gaps in the sense it was around knowledge that
It was around the knowledge.
to gather from the observation.
Absolutely.
And also in terms of things that perhaps didn't occur during the observation.
Yes, that I was unable to
Fine,
observe.
that's great. Okay. Now in terms of the witness, you said quite a lot about the involvement with Sally, wasn't it? Yeah.
It was Sally.
In terms of the preparation with your candidate to identify an appropriate
Yes.
witness, can you just say a little bit more about how you went about that?
Yes, of course. What I did was, when I actually went into Susan's workplace, I'd prearranged a time to obviously meet up with both Sally and Susan, my candidate, and I asked Sally if she could be present so that would she be happy being able to observe Susan during the day-to-day activities. I explained the standards that she would be needing to cover and where her evidence would need to fit in, because I needed her to understand why Susan needed to be observed doing certain activities. I explained the unit that was going to be covered, and Susan was in agreement that she felt that Sally, through obviously looking at her, was able to observe her doing these activities. So Susan was happy about it being confirmed. It was, we put on the assessment plan the methods that were going to be used, and one of the methods we put down was the fact that Sally was going to be able to witness her doing her day-to-day tasks.
Fine. So a prior discussion with Susan, then an approach to Sally,
Yes.
then you produce the assessment
Absolutely.
plan. That's
Yes.
fine. Thanks, Jill. I think we've covered the requirements of A1.1. What we need to do now is move on to A1.2,
Okay.
where I'm expecting you to talk about your approach to judging the evidence that you've gathered.
Okay.